Hey everybody, we are talking about the greatest Washington Redskins team ever assembled. And welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs podcast. My name is Greg, I'm your host. This channel is dedicated to news and commentary for the Washington Commanders and sometimes some good old stories about the Washington Redskins. So if you enjoy that, please consider subscribing to this channel. When you do, hit that notification bell so you won't miss any other video releases. If you're also trying to figure out other ways to support this channel, you should actually go and visit our partners here with the Washington Football Maniacs. Our partners are Mint Mobile. Check this out.
Have you ever thought to yourself, why in the is my wireless cell phone bill so high? What are you paying all of that money for? Well, at Mint Mobile, you can get all of those features for a fraction of the cost. They are built on the nation's largest 5G network, and they keep their costs low because they directly sell to you. Switching to Mint Mobile is so easy. It took me less than 15 minutes using Mint Mobile's eSIMs card. And if you don't have an eSIMs card with your cell phone, just get in touch with Mint Mobile and they'll send you a SIMs card through the mail absolutely free. Big Wireless wants you to think that they are the only game in town, but let's send them packing. Switch to Mint Mobile today. Go to our link down at the bottom in the description. Try mintmobile.com/maniacs to get started today. And get this special offer for new customers. Get any plan on Mint Mobile for $15 a month. That's right, $15 a month for any plan on Mint Mobile, but you gotta act now. Now let's get back into the podcast.
$15 a month for unlimited everything with a wireless plan? Are you kidding me? Please, like I said, switch to Mint Mobile if you want to. Follow the link in the description. It will be down below. But talking about something that was unbelievable, that 1991 Washington Redskins team was one of the best teams that I think I've ever seen in the history of the NFL. Now, am I biased? Probably. But if you were old enough to witness that team in 1991, then you witnessed greatness. You witnessed a team that was full of dominance. And honestly, I don't even know how they lost 2 games that year. I mean, you know, one game, actually both games were against NFC East teams. So I could probably say that's probably the only way that they would have lost games is, you know, against teams that see them twice a year, every single year. And both of those games were pretty close. The Dallas game was really close. They basically won it at the end. I think it was an interception from Mark Rippon that sealed the fate for the Redskins against the Cowboys. And then against the Eagles, it was the last game of the season, and Washington wasn't starting any of their starters anyway. But other than that, it was a very dominant team. And it was a team that easily you knew we're going to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's just all it is to it. And I just feel like, honestly, I just feel like this is probably the best team that you'll ever witness. Honestly, do. I just feel like even, you know, the 1983 team was pretty dominant as well. I actually don't remember that team losing more than 1 or 2 games that season. And they were pretty dominant, but then, of course, they couldn't finish the job. They wound up getting routed, pretty much blown out against the Raiders in that Super Bowl. I remember that. I believe I was 8 years old, and I was in the floor crying because my team had just gotten whooped. But yeah, kind of wanted to do a little bit of a reaction to this greatest team ever 30 years later. It's hard to believe. Actually, 30 years later, at this point now, yeah, I guess it has been 30. I sort of say I feel like it's been longer than that, but I was 16 years old. Had a beautiful mullet back in the early 90s, and don't laugh, but and yes, it was black. Obviously, not that way anymore. But anyway, 30 years later, the greatest team ever.
There's no higher feeling in sports.
No higher feeling. I mean,
We knew that we were better than them.
Offense, defense, and special teams were all ranked in the top
this
five.
team was so.
The Washington Redskins were the premier
They
team.
were so dominant.
60 minutes.
Dominant on offense, defense, special teams, everything. I mean, they had no weaknesses on this team.
I really feel like the Washington football team, that organization is the #1 sports franchise in the world.
Great job, hey! Proud of all of you, man.
It is a city of winners and a city of momentum, and people were super excited.
Brad Edwards, I remember Brad Edwards back then.
We were
Of course, Charles Mann. Charles Mann was a great defensive end for the Washington Redskins. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, look at you see these pictures of these fans all together, and just a team that
I think that city
pulled the whole city together.
city in the world. And the one thing that unites that city when it's so divided in so many different ways
Yeah,
is the Washington Redskins.
that's true. That was so true.
Fans that loved us as players and loved what we did on the field.
And I think as far as home field advantage, I don't know that I recall being anywhere where we had as much support as we had here and as much fan energy that really drove our football team.
And I think that's why we played so hard because, we didn't just see them as fans, we saw them as family.
They know when to cheer and when to boo, and you're going to get it. If you're not performing for them, they're going to let you know. I loved it. And they were passionate, and they were after it every single week.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing that I really miss about our fan base right now is that the passion is really turned into more of a I wouldn't say a hatred, but just overall so much disappointment and things like that. So I really miss that. Keep on going.
I start off, and I got an owner that says we're going to the Super Bowl.
I mean, Joe Gibbs was probably the best coach ever for the Redskins.
It should be the happiest day of
And we're hoping that Dan Quinn is going to follow suit, but
They're eating hot dogs and stuff, and I feel like I'm going to throw up.
yeah.
First of all, Mr. Cook had enough guts to sign up a young guy coaching football that had never been a head coach. And then the fans. That football team is important to them. And so I took all that, and the reality hit me. I can't let them down.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely a head coach that really knew how to get the best out of his players, but an owner, as Joe Gibbs said, an owner that was taking a lot of chances on a young guy who'd never been a head coach before. But as we all know, later on, you realized why Jack Hickok made that move. It was because there was just something about Joe Gibbs. You have some people who are certainly leaders. They carry themselves as leaders, and Joe Gibbs has always done that. Now, that's not to say that, there were stories about Jack Hickok really pretty much giving up on Joe Gibbs there in that first season because the Redskins were 0-5. But later on, of course, he realized you got to be patient.
And so I think a lot of that is what drove me.
Let's hit it rolling now. Let's earn this thing today. Nothing gets away from us. Let's earn it today, okay?
Joe was a perfectionist to the nth degree, and that's what he expected on the field, and he just wasn't. I mean,
He was talking about Joe Gibbs being a perfectionist on the field, and And that's the thing. He paid attention to detail. It's a lot of I think the reason why guys like Bill Belichick was so successful is because he paid attention to every single little detail. And Joe Gibbs, I thought, was mastermind at that.
There's none better that I've ever seen in my life that had that rapport that we had as a team that respected a guy as much as we did Joe Gibbs.
This is the best thing about Joe Gibbs.
Gary Clark is one of the best wide receivers I think to ever play the game.
You wanted to win for him.
Yes. That's the thing.
Everybody loves
you want to win for your coach, right? And Joe Gibbs was the type that really wanted. I mean, he wanted the best at his team, but his team wanted to give him the best.
You never had to worry about guys off the field. They were singularly focused. They didn't loud talk anybody. There wasn't a lot of trash talk. They just showed up and dominated. And that's really what that year was all about, domination.
The reason why that team, honestly, in my opinion, is the best team ever is you don't hear a lot about the individual names because we did everything virtually as a team.
And that was the thing. This team never had what I considered big superstars.
Everything was broken down into units for us. You had the Hogs, of course. You had the Posse, which was the Three Ys. You had
the Posse, Mark Rippon, the Ripper.
Defense. All these things that just came together.
Is there any other big, beefy type position in football known more than the Hogs?
Well, I tell you, keep your jersey clean throughout a season, 7 sacks.
He never got touched the whole year. He didn't get touched. To throw a deep ball, you got to have time for those receivers to get downfield. And so you think about all the bombs that Rippon threw that year. That's because nobody got near him for 5 or 6 seconds, which is a testament to that line. I mean, that line,
And that's one thing that, we've been talking about as far as rebuilding this Washington Commanders team is the fact that if you really want to have the offense working like it should, then you've got to be able to build everything from the front out, from in the trenches. In the trenches is where you win and lose football games. And that's a fact. If you don't have a good offensive line, if you don't have an offensive line that is dominant, then your offense is really not going to click like it should. And that was the thing back in this 91 season. You had an offensive line that was dominant, and they had been dominant throughout the 80s. And you had a couple of those Hogs that were new guys like Jim Lachey. But for the most part, this offensive line, they slowly rotated new guys in, but it was still a lot of the same guys. Joe Jacoby, for instance, he was he should be a Hall of Famer, basically. But he was one of those guys who you were just not going to beat. And so Mark Rippon that year had so much time to throw the football, which was good for him because what he really excelled on was those bombs downfield. He really, his short passes were ugly, but his bombs downfield were like Picasso.
I will put that offensive line that year up against any offensive line in NFL history.
Then you look at Gary, Art, and Ricky. 3 guys, I think, on the football team that they all could be standing out by themselves, but they understood they were a team.
I don't think there was a number one receiver. They were all number one.
Today, I think it was the best 3 receivers as a group.
I agree.
Well, the main thing about the posse was that they really did complement one another. If you think about the way that they played, you can envision it, I'm sure, if you remember back then.
The posse and the receiver group, which was certainly for me, kept me up at night.
As a player, you got to pinch yourself to say, hey, I had an opportunity to play with greatness, and greatness as it ever comes.
A lot of great things we can be doing.
Yeah, I tell you, those receivers, hopefully we're starting to build a similar unit. That's what I'm really hoping for.
Work together.
We're putting up, 30, 40 points. Our defense is shutting people down.
That year, we shut out 3 football teams.
It's unheard of. Unheard of that a team was so dominant that they actually shut out 3 football teams that year. You hear about a team maybe shutting out 1 team during the year, but never 3.
Can't be that team that's the best team in the NFL, right? And you don't go to the show.
Exactly.
Joe Gibbs walked over and he said in just such a matter-of-fact way, we have one goal and one goal only. That's to go and win the Super Bowl.
In the playoff run, y'all know, it was a good run.
More than a good run. They dominated Atlanta.
Glanville, who left tickets for Elvis every week, is now trying to bring their little program to RFK.
Yeah. Little program to RFK, and the Redskins just completely dominated Atlanta. That was the seat cushion game.
Like, you know, they were,
I mean,
end this
they were talking about how that they were just going to come in and just, you know, end Washington's run. They had MC Hammer out there. I mean, they were just trying to be all flashy and just loose and like, yo, this is going to be fun.
I do.
But they learned. They really learned. I mean, the Redskins completely dominated the Falcons. I think MC Hammer left at halftime. It was a soggy day that day. I remember the field looked like it was just all torn up.
Those seat cushions start coming down in
Yep,
real time.
the seat cushions.
It was almost sending those, we love you guys, to all of us on the field as fans, to players.
And then, of course, in the NFC Championship game, they faced the Detroit Lions, which they were actually a team that they started the season against, and they destroyed the Detroit Lions in the season opener, and they did the same thing to them in the NFC Championship game, and it was just total dominance. I mean,
the game's over after the first play.
pretty much, yeah, after the first play.
Stokes picks it up. We have the ball. We give it to Mark Rippon and our offense on like the 10-yard line. We score. Never look back.
Yeah.
We were NFC champs and go on to the Super Bowl to play.
And that was just a fantastic feeling, just to know that this team was heading back to the Super Bowl. And of course, you know, against the Bills, that was a big thing because the Bills were a high flying team. They were favorite, I believe. I mean, they were the sexy team basically. The Redskins were not. But
we took it all in.
I remember that right away when that game started. You know, there was a little bit of, there was like a 3 and out, I think, for the Redskins in that first game, or I mean the first series. Same for the Buffalo Bills, and that second drive, they got things going on, and really thought that the Redskins were going to, well, supposedly they had scored. Art Monk had scored, but then they reversed the touchdown because he had stepped, one of his feet had stepped on the out of bounds line.
This did happen. This is really cool. This is what we're supposed to do.
You know, eventually they just got up by, I think it was 24-0. And while the Bills had an opportunity, I mean, they were, in a way, they were coming back. Momentum was kind of starting to shift. And then Redskins basically scored another touchdown, got it back. They never looked back after that. I mean, just to completely.
I remember all the time he and I had our conversations about what I wanted to do. And I was overwhelmed because I kept my promise and told him about the things I wanted to do, and I made it. So
Yeah.
Cool.
So the legacy. So we'll stop it there, but I'm telling you that if you were too young to watch the Redskins win that Super Bowl in 1991, you really just don't understand the level of dominance. Hopefully, you know, you can find a few of those games on YouTube. I noticed that some of these older games are popping up on YouTube where you can actually watch them. But to really have witnessed, man, I tell you, it was exciting. And I've not seen that level of dominance from this team, of course, since then. So you're looking at over 30 years that this team has been able to be that good. And so, how does that relate now as we get into present day? Now we have Dan Quinn, who is the head coach. We got a new front office. We got a new ownership. We got everything is new. I'm starting, I'm sensing some similarities actually, because we're starting to see some competence in the front office. How that they have, did things in free agency. How they're going to do things in the draft. The players that they're bringing in, high caliber, quality players. Maybe not superstars, maybe not splashy signings, but people who's going to be able to come in and get the job done. And then allowing yourself to slowly build your team out with special players through the draft. This is something that is paramount for this Commanders team to be able to do. And, will Dan Quinn be able to get this team back up to anywhere close to what that Redskins team was? It remains to be seen. I think a lot's going to really depend on who they choose as a quarterback. I think that will be a franchise-changing pick there. They have got to get that right. There's so much riding on that pick. And that is the hardest position ever to pick on a team, as quarterback. So, folks, I hope that this kind of brought you back. I hope that this maybe has kind of reminded you why you're such a big fan of this team. It's because of seasons like that. Those seasons where a team can be so dominant. And honestly, I would take that 1991 team and I would put it against any team from any era. And I think that team would dominate. I really would. They were that good. There were no weaknesses on that team whatsoever. None. Offense, defense, special teams, everything clicked. Wide receivers, you had 1A, 1B, 1C. You did not have wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 as far as talent. They were all on the same page. You had an outstanding running team. Ernest Biner, not Gerald Riggs. Yeah, Gerald Riggs. And then Ricky Irvin. Ricky Irvin was a rookie, I think, at that point, but he was a good running back. He was a really good running back. And of course, a dominant offensive line, a quarterback who I would honestly say that was his best season as a professional. He looked very pedestrian in the year after that. Did manage to get the Redskins to sneak into the playoffs, but not the same level of greatness that he was in 1991. But nevertheless, a quarterback who just took the NFL by storm that year. And then a defense that was dominant. I mean, Charles Mann, Wilbur Marshall, someone who had success from that Chicago's Bears vaunted defense. Darryl Green, Kurt Cavea, just so many names. Fred Stokes, so many names on that great Redskins defense in 1991. I mean, outstanding defense. You had Martin Mayhew, you had Todd Bowles. So, I mean, Brad Edwards, of course, as we saw in this special. So many fantastic guys. And, of course, Brian Mitchell, who turned out to be a special teams ace. Chip Low Miller, who was one of the all-star kickers of the league. This team was dominant. A future Hall of Fame head coach. I mean, just an outstanding team. And it's been big shoes to fill since that point. Even Joe Gibbs coming back in his second tenure, as far as his success, it was a shell of what he did in his first tenure. So I'm hoping that now we have a new era where things are getting back to that type of dominance. And I think pretty soon we will be. And I think, honestly, my prediction is by 2026, this team will once again get back into being a team that is so dominant that you just expect them to win each and every season. Folks, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, give it a share. Let me know your remnants about that 1991 team. And with that said, if you're not old enough, maybe try to go on YouTube and try to find some games from 1991. Just sit back and just watch in awe. I mean, because that team was truly special. Folks, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then as I said, give it a like, give it a share. And with that said, I will see you in the next one.